washing over me like rain in a land already flooded. Time again for lessons learned and strength to break the dam. And how can I be tame when the wild in my soul remains? Teacher, come to me. Teacher, set me free. Along the path I happen on the demons I must face, and the light and the choice. On and on, my journey takes me through the twisted wood. And how can I be still and know the boundless reaches of my will? Teacher, walk with me. Teach me endlessly. Sense the rush, the feeling that comes over me when I realize I'm not alone. And instantly I know that you and I in truth are one. Take the journey to your inner lands and touch the light within you without your hands. Teacher, I am free. The teacher lives in me. The teacher lives in me. The teacher
Wow. Ginger and Lynda, everyone. If you're live streaming, you can find them online and find out where they'll be. If you're in the house, you have an opportunity to connect with them after the service, and you can even take them home in CD form. Maybe you can follow them around if you're willing to be a roadie. I don't know. You have to talk to them about that. So isn't that what unity is all about, is finding and opening up to the teacher within? The teacher within each of us, the teacher that is greater even than the whole, that surrounds every moment, that infuses every moment, that when we stand in our principles, when we stand in our practice, when we stand in our truth, we know that that ethereal and energetic and vibrational and tangible teacher is everywhere present with the fullness of wisdom. That's our practice. But we have these other things that get in the way, don't we? There's sometimes that we can't hear the teacher, not the one within, not the one that's greater than us, not the one that is really all of that all wrapped into one consciousness. So what gets in the way? What gets in the way from our listening? There are times, are there not, where we're asleep, where we're not open, receptive, responsive, where we're in fact on the hamster wheel of the human condition, running our motors, running our minds, running our egos, running our story. And that is one of the only times that we tend not to hear this teacher. One of my favorite scenes in the film Cold Mountain, and it's one of my favorites because it's so metaphysical, is a time when the lead character is talking about war and the trials of war and the human condition, the problems that the human condition has, and referencing people's frustration with God. People going, God, why? And she says something like this, liberally paraphrasing. I am so sick and tired of hearing people calling to God when man is making the rain and standing in the rain and crying out to God to change it. It's a powerful moment in the film. A powerful moment of awakening where we recognize that in fact we do create rain, do we not? And we stand in it and then we go, can't someone stop it? And there is nothing that can make us feel more quickly distant from the idea of God, the feeling of God, the knowing of God as life and intelligence and wisdom and power, all these magnificent, omnipresent things, than us putting up our own galactic shield to keep the God consciousness out. The problem is that we can't always see it when we're doing it, right? We can see it in each other. Sometimes we can see it in ourselves, even when we're in this spiritual state of love, the love bliss state where we go, oh, these are all my ego identities. These are all the things that jack me up and take my life on a travel tour to destinations I do not choose and wish to go. Sometimes we're in this state where we can see it. But there's something funny that happens when we're in the state of being it, when we're in the state of the veil, of the illusionary consciousness, of the asleep mind, the mind that is in a slumber. Something happens. It's almost just inherent in that state of consciousness that we can't see it. We can't see it. And if we can't see it, we can't come out of it, right? And the only thing that can heal that state of consciousness, the only practice that can heal it, is bringing in the silence, bringing in awareness, bringing in awakening. And truly, the only healer of that condition is the practice of meditation and mindfulness. The practice of meditation and mindfulness is the one that can open us up, that can create these spaces where the teacher can come in and whisper us awake. But has anyone heard the sound that's not a whisper? When the teacher comes and it's no longer whispering, it's no longer singing us a good morning song or a nighttime lullaby, but in fact it's screeching, it's screaming. We've become so enmeshed in the illusionary life, so enmeshed in the ego, we have fed it so many times that the teacher begins to scream. In traditional Christianity, they call this the devil. They call it evil. In unity, we call it a lot of other things: separation consciousness, ego, false sense of self, false sense of identity, our lower consciousness, our carnal mind. So how do we wake up from that state of consciousness? Last Sunday, we talked about sacred accountability, and we talked about that when we're in these closed states of mind, we tend to externalize the negativity. We tend to manifest or demonstrate external authorities. Those who will tell us what's going on, those who will ticket us, those who will punish us. We tend to externalize those things. We, to some degree, export our own spiritual authority. So it's enough to know this, but how do we wake up? What is ours to recognize? How do we bring mindfulness into our lives and see patterns that keep us asleep? We all have stories. Everyone that is a human being will have a story. But are we willing and ready to awaken to the moment or moments when that story has become our life, when we have become our story? When our story is actually living our life rather than the Christed cosmic consciousness, that consciousness of wisdom, that consciousness of power, that consciousness of life. We can see in systems, right, in this world today where the illusionary consciousness looks like it's running the show, does it not? It really looks like it's running the show. Because the ego has been so fed, the illusion has been so fed and so fortified that it seemingly holds the power. Why is it so hard to unarm the ego? Well, we can't see it when we're in it. The ego denies itself, and emancipation from it threatens it. Does that sound anything like the stories in the Bible about the devil, or the stories that people create from little bits and pieces in the Bible about a devil? Sounds like it, doesn't it? And in unity, a lot of times we don't talk about that, so we don't get to have as much fun talking about the old man, the adversary, the devil. But if we miss having that conversation, we miss a certain value in the spiritual practice. Because there is a reason why the archetype of the devil is around. There's a reason why that story comes up in the human condition, and it comes up in the human consciousness. I was just on one of the panels for one of our ministerial students that's graduating, and you get to read what's called their credo. It's their belief system. And I was so impressed by this one student's write-up on God, because in unity we talk a lot about God consciousness and what is it. We talk a lot about how there is really oneness, and the moment we even say God, we're implying a separateness. And that's really an illusion, is it not? There's one power and one presence. It's life, it's love, it's God. Anything beyond that statement is really an idea that humanity puts upon it. But she had a beautiful piece in her writing that went into describing, because they have to say what I think about God, what do I think about humans, what do I think about all of these things. They've got to put all of that into a paper. And one of the things that I was most impressed with was her looking at these different ideas, these different teachings of God, and these different phases of God, and that knowing that in unity we say, I and the Father are one, just like Jesus, the master teacher, did. We say, I and the source are one. I and creation, I and that which created me are one. There is oneness there. But she had a little caveat in her paper. She said, that's great for the times that I'm needing to lift myself up. But the times when I'm in my stuff, and she didn't say it like this is what I got from it, but the times that we're in our stuff, those are the times we need a devotional God. Those are the times we need the God that is more than we are. Those are the times we need something to reach for, not to be in this arrogant ego state of mind that says, oh, I am all that God, as I am lashing and slashing out at everything around me or everything within me that is sacred. Those are the times why in traditional Christianity, we get down on our knees and we ask for help. We get down on our knees and we say, something is beyond me. I can't see it. Help me. And if we have true spiritual maturity, we can know a principle and a practice. We can know source as one, and we can also utilize every aspect of the mind to bring the fullness of ourselves into an authentic practice of divinity. An authentic practice with the divine, which you can't even say with the divine because you imply two, right? But when we have an unwillingness, an arrogance, or an ego within us that isn't willing to wake up, the teacher cannot come. So, just like in traditional Christianity, they talk about what the devil does. Are you ready to talk about some of the things the devil does today? And it's not the scary devil. It's the idea of us when we're in separation consciousness. It's the idea of us when we're our own worst enemies. It's the idea of us when the universe keep whispering, grow, grow, grow. And we keep hiding away from it. We keep staying in our story. We keep shouting out to our littleness and feeding it. We keep engaging the ego. And then we stand in the midst of ourselves saying, why? How? Why is my life not working? Why is this part not sustainable? Why is this not healing? Why is this not everything that's unity? Why does it not look like it or feel like it? So here are the fun tricks. Some of the fun tricks are to not only know this practice, but to begin to recognize it. And I said last Sunday, and I'm going to say it again, I think really recognizing it is a practice because it has to be a compassionate practice, right? If it's not a compassionate practice with ourselves, then we end up using the law of mind action to shame ourselves into less than. So the way to take this conversation is to take this conversation with compassion and to take this conversation with just simply finding it interesting. Because if we want to get the gifts from our stuff, we must find that conversation simply interesting, without attachment, without condemnation or criticism, but simply as interesting as we would find it if we were given a paper to do on a philosophical subject and we were investigating something. So as I said last Sunday, it's like putting together pure love and boot camp. Pure love and boot camp. This work is not for the lighthearted. This work is for those who are really willing to get down and dirty and look at it all. That's where we come alive. That's where we wake up. When we can look at our stuff with non-attachment, to be able to be present to it and allow ourselves to waken. In the Gospel of Thomas, which is one of the parts of the Nag Hammadi scrolls that were discovered in Egypt in 1945, it has these phrases, these words of Jesus, and one of the phrases is this. Jesus said, "Those who seek should not stop seeking until they find. When they find, they will be disturbed." That's probably one of the most repeated things I just love to say. Maybe because I've been so disturbed in my life. But I think it's very reassuring to say, when you find it, you're not going to go, "Glory, glory, hallelujah." You're going to go, "What? What? Ugh." It says, when they find, they will be disturbed. And when they are disturbed, they will marvel and rule over all. They will marvel and rule over all. That's a spiritual awakening where we recognize the law of mind, action, and activity, where we recognize I am not separate from my reality. I am a co-creator in it. There is an awakening power. Like Myrtle said, if we would just use everything that's already here, that's right here for us, if we would just awaken to what is right here. And then we find that we will marvel and rule over all. How could we rule over all if we were not a cause? If we didn't have the power to cause something into being, how could we rule over all? This passage is showing us that when we have an awakened consciousness, when we have an awakened mind, when we are awake to the human condition and the spiritual reality through the principles, there is a new world to live in. And boy, disturbing to see that we've been living in another. In passage 5, it says, Jesus said, "Know what is in front of your face, and what is hidden from you will be disclosed to you. For there is nothing that is hidden that won't be disclosed, that won't be revealed." But we have to wake up. We get to wake up. It is our divine birthright to awaken. And in order to awaken, it's important to see the stories, to see the patterns. Films show us the patterns all the time. Work with archetypes show us these patterns of the human condition. Has anyone ever read an astrology chart and found out, oh, I'm a Virgo, that means I have such attention to details, that means I could be a little crazy sometimes, and gone, it's okay now. Oh, I'm a this or a that, and that means I have this part of my, personality, and this is how it shows up, and not going to fight it anymore. Have you ever had that experience or seen someone having that experience? Until we see and recognize the patterns and let all of the energy around them that is holding them into place simply diffuse like popping a balloon, we will be recreating them. We will be living on this hamster wheel of the human condition, wondering, why is something doing this to me? Why have I found myself in this situation again? Why does life look like this on the inside and the outside? So we have to recognize and see the pattern. We have to acknowledge that we have stories. We all have stories. I have stories. And the only problem with a story is when we become it. So here are some patterns to recognize from the Terminator. Can we call it the Terminator now? The adversary, the devil, separation consciousness, the illusionary state of mind. When confronted with its stuff, with our stuff, with the stuff of the world, the stuff of someone else, there are 5 excuses that the illusionary mind will give. The first is to deflect. To deflect. Anything's coming at me? Let's see if I can just get it away. How could I deflect so that I make this conversation irrelevant? How could I either keep your mind spinning to such a degree that you don't even know what you started talking to me about? Maybe that I don't even know what I started processing. I started out with this life decision thinking I need to make it, and all of a sudden I'm back to when I was 5 and this happened. Whatever it is, deflect. Whatever it is there a way that I can avoid? If we can start to recognize when we and others deflect rather than presence a situation, we've started to awaken. Can we recognize when there are outright excuses? If we were in a traditional church, we'd be talking about the devil and all the excuses of why the devil made me do it. The darkness made me do it. All these excuses, rather than accountabilities, sacred accountabilities, right? Because the ego has to make excuses. So when we recognize excuses, we know we're in ego. Anytime. It doesn't matter. Is anyone's ego mind saying, but what if they're right? But what if they're real excuses? I mean, these are valid ones. That really is how and why. When we have conversations with our excuses, We are in ego. It's the litmus test. The next is to bring up irrelevant information. To bring up irrelevant information. Have you ever been bombarded by irrelevant information? Anything to bring us off track, to distract. The next is to project. To project. To take whatever is going on in me, and Unity people usually love this one. And we even have practices that go, anything at all that I see or perceive outside of me, let me see how I am all of that. Let me see how I'm doing all of that. Let me see how I'm thinking all of that. Let me see how I am, everything that I don't like that's out there. But the ego mind tends to project. It tends to be slithery, deceptive. To find out, is there any way I could make this about you so we could stop talking about me? Is there any way you might have some of the same issues, irrelevant information, so that we could deal with your issues so I don't have to be present to mine? Project. And the last one is to flat out lie. To deny. To be so uncomfortable that we make up stories. To be so uncomfortable and to have fed the ego mind, to have fed the separation consciousness so much that it believes so deeply in protecting its own self-image, in protecting its own field of asleepness, in protecting its own illusion and delusion, that it is willing to take away your own reality. It is willing to take away someone else's reality. It is willing to force feed an illusion into someone else's mind and take away their power to activate their own wisdom. Take away their power to choose. Take away their power to have all of the information that they would normally have. And instead of swimming in a field of open information where they can feel their own GPS, their own God positioning system, where they can feel it, instead, you edge God out so much, ego, edge God out so much that all they're sitting there left with is your own version of reality. And they don't actually have access to the truth unless they call forth, of course, their superpowers, which many of us have, the clairvoyance, the clairsentience, all of those God listenings that you know something is off here. In my mind, in my world, there's no greater error, sin. Sin is missing the mark. It's so fun talking about all this nasty stuff. We talk about all the nice stuff so much in Unity. But boy, is it like tasty talking about all of our little nastiness. If you're not having fun yet, then we're being too serious. Because the more serious it is, the more we feed it. This is part of the human condition. In my mind, that sin or that missing the mark of lying or withholding or spinning truth, spinning perception for someone else is one of the greatest errors we can do. Because what it is saying, it's taking a stand and it's saying, my ego is more important than your God. My ego's idea of it needing to stay safe, needing to have things the way it wants it, needing to what? Fill in the blank of what it will tell you, what stories it will say about why we need to make up a reality and feed it to someone else. That's saying, here, take this and stop listening to your intuition. Stop listening to your God. Stop listening to your wisdom. Stop listening to your power. Stop listening to all of that and instead listen to my ego. Because it has a plan, and that plan is greater. Does that not sound like something you'd want to call the devil? Really? It's no wonder. We have this massive concept in our culture of the devil and evil and how it's a power and it's gonna get you. It's attached to some people, it's living in some people, it's living with some people it's hijacked and they're not even here anymore. It's no wonder, because the ego wears out the opponent. It uses these things to get us hooked. And when we say it like that, it sounds like it's hard to escape, doesn't it? But if we simply recognize that it is a state of mind, a state of consciousness that each one of us have available to us in the smorgasbord of the Garden of Eden, in the smorgasbord of what we can take on in our lives and what we can choose, and we know and we can see it's available to all of us, that diffuses the energy. And we come back to the knowing that there is one power and one presence. It is God, the good omnipotence, and even in the midst of a slumbering moment, it is available, it is accessible, it is pure, it is life, and it is power. Charles Fillmore said, instead of heaven after death, the new Christianity teaches a kingdom of the heavens existing now as a righteous state of mind. It teaches that man makes this heaven here and now by the formative power of his thought. He said, right here and now, the great work of character building is to be done, and whosoever neglects present opportunities, looking forward to a future heaven, for better conditions, is pulling right away from the kingdom of heaven within himself. Pulling away from the kingdom of heaven within himself. So are we willing to wake up to the aspects of ego consciousness, to recognize them in ourselves and recognize them in each other? Because you know what happens? Sometimes we can recognize them in ourselves, but then when we see them in each other, what do? We go right for the fight. We go right for the conversation. We go right for the agreement to make this ego mind a reality, rather than simply recognizing that we have identified the adversary, the old man, the little red man in the frying pan, the ego mind, that in fact, having a conversation with that state of consciousness is a conversation that goes nowhere. Having that conversation simply is like giving ammunition to a fighter. Having a conversation with the ego, trying to reason with it, trying to wake it up if it's not our own, is like giving ammunition to a fighter. There was a post I saw this week about an African community who, when someone does something bad, the whole tribe surrounds them and stones them. No, just kidding. That's some of the other things. You know. The whole community surrounds them and bombards them with all the good they've done, with all the moments of their wisdom, their power, their strength, their light, with all the beauty that they are, and stays around them, telling them how magnificent they are, how beautiful they are, how honorable they are, how amazing they are. Imagine that fight for the ego. That brings in presence and disarms the ego. Some people are like, I'd like to play that in my house. How about we switch it out, right? I'd like to play that at my workplace. A Course in Miracles says, perception is consistent. What you see reflects your thinking. And your thinking but reflects your choice and what you want to see. Your values are determiners of this. For what you value, you must want to see. Believing what you see is really there. It goes on to say, it is impossible to see two worlds which have no overlap of any kind. Seek for the one and the other disappears, but one remains. They are the range of choice beyond which your decision cannot go. The real and the unreal are all there to choose between. Nothing more than these. The real and the unreal. There are two choices: presence, love, or ego, separation. Awaken or stay asleep. Course in Miracles says, love is extension. To withhold the smallest gift is not to know love's purpose. Love offers everything forever. Hold back but one belief, one offering, and love is gone, because you asked for a substitute to take its place. And now must war, the substitute for peace, come with the one alternative that you can choose for love. Your choosing it has given it all the reality it seems to have. What will we choose? The author Christine Mason Miller says, at any given moment, you have the power to say, this is not how the story is going to end. Let's wake up. Namaste.